guys, today I'm going to be sharing about the symptoms that I had leading up to figuring out that I was pregnant. Just for background, I did not track my ovulation. We had just started trying, and so we just were going to keep it chill, not worry about tracking ovulation or whatever, and see where the Lord led in that. And then, like, obviously we were trying to have a baby, but we weren't gonna just worry about tracking ovulation to start until later on. I'm gonna give you my things, but I don't have like days past ovulation. Something interesting here is on my little app that tells me when I'm ovulating, I think it was actually very wrong, because on 7/30/23, it actually said that I was before ovulation. But if we look at my notes for that, and then me remembering this in my head, I think I actually ovulated several days before 7/30, just based on like my knowledge and like how my body felt. I generally write down my symptoms each month for my period, and my periods had been very irregular leading up to when I got pregnant, and so because of that, I was very in tune with what symptoms my body was indicating, so that way I could see, like, am I actually ovulating, or am I just, like, what's happening with my body right now? So because of that, I was kind of, like, knowledgeable about how my body works at each stage in the cycle. And so even though my app said that I was supposed to ovulate, like, on 8/2 or so, I think I actually, whenever I ovulated and got pregnant, it was probably a bit sooner. So I'm gonna guess, like, I don't know, the 25th or 26th of, at least, if not maybe even before, of July. So think about that, 25th, 26th of July, and then August. Because on 7/30/23, and this was the biggest sign that I had, and that was a small amount of spotting that I noticed that day. And I never spot, like, I'm either on my period or I'm not. There's usually not an in-between in the middle of my cycle. So that was very surprising to me. And so that day I'm like, oh my goodness, I must be pregnant. Like, there's absolutely no way I'm not pregnant, because I never ever spot. But then again, I had always been pretty consistent up until about 6 months before we started trying for a baby with my periods. And since that had been inconsistent, I was like, okay, maybe this is just a random fluke and my body is going crazy. But anyway, so 7/30, that was a spotting, and so that's when, I'm guessing that's when implantation happened. And implantation usually happens a couple days after ovulation. And like I said, just based on my symptoms, that's probably what happened. And then, so if you notice the spotting and you usually don't have spotting, pregnancy is probably one of those options. It's going to be could be pretty likely. But the thing is too, like, that doesn't, you know, it's not indicative of anything, because there's always things that could be going on in your body. But I think that one's like a very prominent one, and some people do spot for implantation and some people do not. So 8/1, I said I felt icky to my stomach, either cramps or nausea. I ate crackers and some beans to help subside. I don't know why I was eating beans and felt like that would be helpful, but apparently I did. And I do not think this was nausea, guys. This was probably cramps. And I was probably overthinking it too. 8/2, last day, and this was before I was supposed to ovulate. So last day before I was supposed to ovulate, and today my mouth has felt dry, even when drinking a lot of water. So dry mouth. I don't know what that means. I think I was just writing down everything that I felt. 8/3/23. I said yesterday I was feeling irritable/sad. I cried and laughed. Today I report acne, and I woke up feeling greasy. I also woke up randomly in the morning, awake and alert, but had a hard time falling back to sleep because a truck honked in the middle of the night, and I, like, woke up and I felt really, like, awake and alert. And I'm like, usually I have no problem falling back to sleep, so I was a little bit confused. I was like, okay, maybe this is like a symptom, but you know, you search anything and anything's a symptom. And then I also wrote for that day, I felt slight pain and pressure in lower belly, very similar though to what I feel the week leading up to my period. It's like down here, that kind of like feeling. Okay, 8'5", 23, acne today and yesterday. And usually I get acne leading up to my period, so this isn't something that's too surprising for me. So I was just kind of writing it down to be like, okay, let me try to figure out like what's me leading up to my period and what's me reporting pregnancy. So that way maybe like next time I can be more aware and be like, oh my goodness, I know I'm pregnant this time. Like whenever I have my next baby or the next one or the next, you know, like etc. Eventually to the point where I'm like, okay, I just know this because my body has told me, and the pregnancy test is just like confirmation, you know. That's what I hope for. Eventually, maybe it'll happen. But anyway, slight lower abdominal cramping, sharp lower ab cramp at around 2 p.m. while swimming, lasted about 30-ish seconds. And once again, like, that could have just been because I worked out or something. That's 8'6", I was bloated. 8'7", my boobs were a little bit sore, but not much. And that's also something that I feel before having my period. So at this point, I was like, okay, you know what? This is all the symptoms that I have leading up to my period. Like bloating, acne, like soreness in the chest area. That's all what I feel leading up to my period. And so I didn't write anything for several more days, because at that point it was just a waiting game. Like I said, my periods have been highly irregular in the 6 months leading up to before we started trying. So because of that, I could be on day like 35 of my cycle, and it would like, it has happened so many months before where I'm like, maybe I'm pregnant, like maybe something crazy happened and I somehow got pregnant. And it did not happen. Like this had happened several times where I was like, day 40, day 42, day 34, and like usually 29 to day 32. So this was like very variable. And then the one just before we started trying, that one period had been so late. It had been on 7/14 is when I got it, but it had been since May that I hadn't had one. So it was like well past day 40, like day 49 or something. It was a long time. Like it was a very long cycle, which kind of freaked me out. And so after that whole thing, we're like, okay, well, let's just start, because we didn't know, like, if there is something going on with my body, is that going to affect our fertility? How's that going to play out? So we were just going to kind of start trying and see, you know, after a couple months, maybe reevaluate and see if there was any issues or if I needed to see an OBGYN about that or whatever, because I was kind of like, this is very unusual. I mean, stress can alter it a bit, but for it to be altered to like day 49 is very unusual, has never happened to me. All of these things leading up, at this point, I think on 8/19, it would have been, 8/19 would have been like day, I'm gonna say like day 35 or 36 or so. Like it was getting close, and we were actually gonna visit my in-laws for the weekend. So because of that, I was like, well, on this day, whether or not I'm pregnant, I'm just gonna take a test and just maybe confirm it or deny it. And I thought for sure it was gonna be negative because my whole symptoms, like it felt very much like I was about to start my period. Like I said, like this acne, like the slight abdominal cramping, very period-like, bloated, soreness, very much like a period. And so on 8/19, I took it and it was positive. And I remember shaking after the test. I don't have any video of that because I genuinely thought it was going to be negative. But I was like, oh my word, I have a baby in my belly and it has been growing here. Oh my goodness. And so I took it into Drew and showed him, and he's like, really? Like, no way. So that was pretty crazy. And then the next day we did share the news with Drew's family. And then by 8, oh no, this is so sad. I didn't feel bad like a lot of this time. And leading up to this, like, I did not feel nauseous. I actually felt great. I just felt, like I said, acne and some bloating. And then, yeah, 8:21, I felt a little bit queasy. And then 8:26 is when it started. So I was about 6 weeks pregnant by that point. And you have to remember, they count pregnancy to the last period. So you're really not pregnant until your ovulation day and your egg gets dropped into the canal, and the sperm meets the egg, and then, you know, you're pregnant. And then that's, you know, the baby is formed. But until that point and until it implants, you don't really know that you're pregnant. But, like, they still count, like, that week before your egg even drops down to meet the sperm. They still count all of that as part of your pregnancy. So, like, you could be 6 weeks pregnant, and if you ovulate like a week after your period, you could be like, technically your baby's been in there for 5 weeks. If you ovulate like 3 weeks after you have your period, you could be like only, what would that be, 3 weeks pregnant, I guess? Then you would only be 3 weeks pregnant. So it's kind of crazy that it's not 3 weeks pregnant, but 3 weeks that the baby has actually been, conception has happened, and the baby is alive. So after conception, obviously there's the DNA of a baby immediately created at conception. So what was crazy is around week 6, 8:26, I almost puked. I gag at icky smells. Water helped me to not puke. And then at 8:31, I threw up today. And throwing up helped me feel good enough to eat. And that was at 7 weeks pregnant. So that's when that really started. But anyways, I hope that maybe if you're just someone who's like trying to be pregnant and you're like, okay, what are my symptoms? Don't take it too literally. Like, obviously I had this acne and I had like soreness and I felt bloated, but like to realize that I was pregnant. But at the same time, I know that so many people have so many different like reactions to being pregnant, and some people don't even experience morning sickness at all. I experienced morning sickness all day, every day for weeks on end. So it's just going to be very variable to the person. But I know, like, I was searching in those 2 weeks. I was, like, watching every 2 weeks video, and everyone had all these different symptoms. And you're like, okay, which ones are mine? And you could sit there and analyze every single one of them. I thought that I wasn't. Turns out I was. So it's just a waiting game from here. But if you are in that 2 week wait and you are hoping for a baby, I am praying and hoping for one for you too. And if you aren't and you just came along because you're like, hey, I want to see, I'm a nosy person, want to learn more about your life and what you're up to and what your thoughts are about pregnancy, then thanks for coming along. I truly appreciate it. I'm going to also be sharing in the coming weeks about my registry, what I've decided to put on it. And yes, I have made a registry. I am currently almost 14 weeks pregnant. I've already made the registry. It's already out to my mom and my mother-in-law, and I'm going to be sending it out to family soon. So I'm not going to be putting it out for other people until like family gets a solid stab at it. But I'm excited to make a video about it because I think it's going to be a little bit different than what most people do. And I'm a super practical person, so I've made it very practical. So go ahead and subscribe if you want to see that one coming out. I also talk about all things faith, finance, and wifehood. And so if those are items that interest you, and honestly, they kind of all intertwine. Like, we'll have a conversation about finances, but honestly, like, faith gets brought into that conversation as well. Or in general, I'm just doing lifestyle things like where I'm at in life and how you can be frugal and productive and save for baby and be a good wife all in one, all together. So if that's something that you're like, okay, these are items that I really want to learn about, maybe you don't really want to learn about them, but some of them you find it interesting, or you just want to follow along for baby stuff, then go right ahead and subscribe. I appreciate it very much. If you don't want any of that stuff, then feel free to walk right along and don't feel bad about that. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. I hope you guys have a great day.